and welcome to the session titled Switch Towards Energy Efficiency and Renewable Garment Industry in Cambodia. My name is Julia Hollnagel. My name is Julia Hollnagel, and I'm the Senior Officer in Sustainable Transport for the Pacific region, and I will guide you through the first half of this session. During this session, we will learn more about the plans for the EU for the garment sector, including eco-design for sustainable products and circular economy. And then we will present the initial saving potential for the audits of energy efficiency and renewable energy in the garment factories in Cambodia. Furthermore, we will also have a presentation from a garment factory that implemented recommendations based on the energy audits from the EU Switch Garment project. And after that, we will have a Q&A session and discussion with the speakers. So to start off the session, we would like to invite the welcome remarks from Mr. Ban Ki-moon, the President and Chair of GHGI.
Excellencies, distinguished participants and guests, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome all of you to this year's Global Green Growth Week, organized by the Global Green Growth Institute. Your participation is evidence that we, the global community, demand climate action, and I want to thank you for doing your part to drive and empower green growth. The climate crisis is perhaps the defining crisis of our times. Every year, we can read and hear more and more about the devastating impacts of extreme weather systems, and this year is proving to be one of the worst years yet, with the record floods, the droughts, and the heat waves, all of which lead to displacements from homes, food crises, and wildfires that disrupt and destroy the lives of millions. We are destroying our hope for a better future, and we need to work together to save our planet. I'm pleased to know that so many of you are coming together to exchange ideas, solutions, and best practices on how to advance the implementation of the Paris Climate Change Agreement, the framework which I helped establish during my time as the Secretary General of the United Nations. I'm especially pleased to know that many of you are joining from all corners of the world, including Africa, Asia, Latin America, the Middle East, and the Pacific, and many of the solutions to be discussed are coming from women and indigenous communities who are most affected by climate change. I encourage you to take full advantage of Global Green Growth Week and engage with one another as green growth champions and practitioners. The climate crisis will require collaboration and collective action from each and every one of us, because climate change knows no borders, and climate change does not discriminate based on race or social class. We can transform our economies and societies and leave a better future, a sustainable and inclusive future, only if we work together. The challenges will be difficult, and there are no shortcuts. But if we work together urgently, I think we can do it. As I have said before, there is no plan B because there is no planet B either. I hope you will join me to make the world a better place for future generations. I wish you very fruitful and successful events during Global Green Growth Week. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Moon, for your video message. Next, I would like to invite Ms. Helena McLeod, the Deputy Director General and Head of the Global Green Growth Planning and Implementation Unit at GHGI, for her welcoming remarks.
Thank you, Julia. And I love to listen to our President and Chair, Ban Ki-moon. We are in a really critical place in the world at the minute, but the wonderful thing is that we have so many of the solutions. And so today we'll be looking at some of those solutions, real activities that can not just change the climate for the better, but also create jobs and save money for business. So this is what I call a win-win. But I'd first like to formally welcome His Excellency Yang Sapala, Secretary of State from the Ministry of Environment, Ms. Camilla Lombard, Deputy Head of Cooperation, Delegation of the European Union in Cambodia, and other distinguished speakers and participants. A huge warm welcome to our Global Green Growth Week, and also a wonderful welcoming to this industry session, and specifically green industry session. Now, the title is Switch Towards Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy in the Garment Industries in Cambodia. And this is a project that I kept my eye on the whole year. It has such significant results, and it's so scalable. It's a wonderful example that we hope to replicate in other countries. And all credit to my wonderful colleague here from the Ministry of Environment for the leadership that you've shown in this sector, and also to the private sector for the discipline that they are also giving to this initiative and this switch. Now, for those of you that don't know GHGI, we really try and stay at the forefront of innovation globally in terms of the green transition. And we really focus on what will make a difference for our countries, yes, linked to the NDCs, but really listening to what can have that catalytic change for them in the country. And so we really try and scale as much as possible and bring in these innovative financial solutions so that we don't just bring in government money, but we also bring in private sector money behind the climate solutions needed. Now, in Cambodia, GHGI country planning is focused on urban development and green industry. And this is a really key part of our strategy for the country in collaboration with the government. Energy consumption is a key part of the profile of industry. And as I've said, it's a real win-win. So if you save energy, you can save money, and that's always great for business. The GHGI-led EU Switch Garment project looks into the opportunity literally to switch towards energy efficiency and renewable energy in the garment industries in Cambodia. And that's what we're going to focus on today. Now, it's a cooperation with the Ministry of Environment, the Ministry of Industry, Science, Technology and Innovation, and of course, with the wonderful funding of the EU. And is also a partnership with the Garment Manufacturing Association of Cambodia and the Sustainable Energy Expert Internationals, the NGOs, GHGs. So it's a wonderful collaboration of these different partners and areas of expertise. Now, the Switch Garment project, funded by the European Union, has its clear goal of improving the energy profile of the garment sector through developing regulatory measures, setting up monitoring, verification and reporting systems, conducting energy audits and mobilizing finance. The 4-year Switch Garment project is highly in line with Cambodian national targets and is expected to reduce greenhouse gas emissions of about 175 kilotons in CO2 equivalent, while reducing energy costs by 20% for garment industries in Cambodia. And of course, that's great for the environment, but it's also great to stay competitive in the global market. I'm very proud to highlight that GHGI, together with the co-implementers, GMAC and GHGs, have mobilized participation of the actors in the garment sector in this project and successfully conducted energy audits in 50 factories. GHGI has also been working towards mobilizing finance to accelerate and promote energy efficiency in the industry. So here today, we're going to hear more about the achievements, but I just want to say from my side, thank you so much to the Ministry of Environment and to the Ministry of Industry, Science, Technology and Innovation and all our partners in this. I think it really is a game-changing initiative, and it's an initiative that the rest of the world can learn from. So thank you for inviting me to open, and I look forward to listening to the panelists today. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your words, Helena. Next, I would like to invite the Secretary of State from the Ministry of Environment of the Kingdom of Cambodia, His Excellency Sopalet, to give his welcoming remarks.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Helena. Ms. Camille Lombard, Deputy Head of Cooperation Delegations of the European Union in Cambodia, distinguished guests. Good afternoon and morning in Cambodia. I'm delighted to be here at the Global Green Growth Week organized by GHGs and taking part in this session on green industry. It is indeed a great opportunity for me to meet representatives from different GHGs member countries. Over the past decades, peace and political stability have allowed Cambodia to achieve remarkable milestones in terms of economic and social development. Industrial sectors has indeed contributed to Cambodia's steady economic growth at an average of 7% for the last 1 decade prior to COVID-19. The garment industry is one of the key pillars of Cambodia's economy and has played a major role in economic advancement of the country. This is the industrial sector's largest employers, representing 16% of GDP in 2018, 80% of export in 2018, 700,000 jobs in 2019, 20% of all employed women. Overall, the garment sectors has supported the livelihood of at least 2.5 to 3 million people, including both direct and indirect beneficiaries from the sectors. At the same time, the increase of investments in the garment industries has put a great demand for energy sources across Cambodia. It is important for Cambodia to meet this demand in both in short and long terms to ensure that Cambodia remains a competitive market for such investment. Given that Cambodia is committed to combat climate change and to pursue sustainable development goals, Cambodia is strongly in favor of achieving sustainable energy goals, namely, 1, to ensure universal access to affordable, reliable, and modern energy services. 2, increase the share of renewable energy in the energy mix. And 3, to promote energy efficiency. Cambodia wants to become less reliant on fossil fuels. In fact, under the Cambodia's updated NDC's nationally determined contribution, which was submitted in 2020, we are committed to increase our share of renewable energy in the energy generation mix to 25% by 2030. Cambodia also plans to not construct any new hydropower plant along the Mekong River and not to approve any coal power plants. Cambodia recently adopted the long-term strategy for carbon neutrality, which aims to have 35% clean and renewable energy in our energy mix by 2050. Cambodia expects to adopt many other sustainable energy policies, as well as the Environmental and Natural Resource Code, to serve as a comprehensive framework in support of other policies. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, one of the challenges for Cambodia is to lack of viable financing instruments and large-scale investment, as well as technology transfer to develop and operate renewable energy infrastructures. As of now, we have several major projects of small and medium-scale solar power plants. We look forward to working with our development partners, as well as national and international investors, to enhance our capacity and our access to climate finance to overcome these challenges. On this note, the Ministry of Environment is delighted to be the government counterpart in implementing the EU-funded and GHGs-led sustainable energy initiative, namely Switch Garment Project. The project development is based on a long-standing cooperation between MOE and GHGs on how to create green growth in Cambodian industrial sectors. GHGs and GMAC are also key partners of the project. Switch Garment project aims to promote sustainable energy practice, both renewable energy and energy efficiency in the garment sector in Cambodia. This will help Cambodia in achieving its national targets. The 4-year Switch Garment project is highly in line with Cambodian national targets and is expected to reduce energy costs by 20% for garment industries in Cambodia. The project will also create jobs, improve air quality, and reduce the emission of greenhouse gases. I'm confident that today we will learn more about the Switch Garment project, as well as the viewpoints of the EU and international brand and a factory, which have implemented recommendations based on the energy audits conducted by the project. I hope you enjoyed the sessions, and I look forward to everyone's active participation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your words. I would like to hand over now to my colleague, Rogier van Mansveld, the project lead of the EU Switch Garment project based in Cambodia.
Yeah, thanks very much, everybody. Just checking if the sound is okay. Great. So thanks so much for the first sessions. We have 4 presentations here, which I already mentioned. 2 of them are online and 2 of them are in person. So I believe that our colleague from the EU, Camilla Lombard, Deputy Head of Cooperation from the EU delegation in Cambodia, managed to get online, and I would like to ask her to share some of their directives relevant to the garment factory where the EU is working on. Camilla, if you're ready, let's see if we can hear you all good, and welcome.
Okay, thank you. Can you all hear me?
Very good, great.
Wow, okay, that was a challenge. Apparently in the EU we can't use Zoom for security reasons, so that's why we had some issues to connect. I'm sorry about that. So thank you very much, first of all, for this invitation. Ms. Helena McLeod, Deputy Director General and Head of the Green Growth Planning and Implementation of GHGI. Sorry. And His Excellency Eng Sopalet, Secretary of State, Minister of Environment from the Royal Government in Cambodia, dear participants, ladies and gentlemen, very happy to be here, very pleased that our project has been selected, I guess, in a way to be discussed and presented in this session and during the Green Growth Week of the GHGI. I agree with what has been said. It's a good project. We are quite impressed by the model and therefore look into ways of potentially scaling it up and continue working on it after it has ended. Let me, I'm not going to kind of remind everybody about the context in Cambodia, as previous speakers already spoke about this, the importance of this sector in Cambodia, both as the biggest export sector, as one of the biggest employers, how many lives that actually depend on how many people's livelihoods depend on this sector in Cambodia. Maybe to mention the challenges that this sector is facing in Cambodia, from skills, access to finance, from and value addition, and the energy costs that are very high in the country. We have seen recently also emerging skills, emerging challenges such as the COVID-19 pandemic, which really created some difficulties for the sector. And we have seen recently also the Russian invasion of Ukraine that has brought quite some new challenges to the sector in terms of impact on energy prices, on supply chains of raw materials, etc. I think keeping those challenges in mind, we do all agree that the sector is vulnerable, that resilience is needed, and considering that the sector is very polluting, and there is kind of an agreement to green the sector, and we are extremely happy, therefore, to see here in Cambodia that the government recently adopted a garment strategy, very welcome, and something that we would like to continue to discuss with the government to see how we can contribute to the implementation of this strategy. We are really happy to see in the garment strategy and also in our discussions with various stakeholders in Cambodia that we do seem to agree on the challenges and opportunities in the sector. And therefore, we are really quite optimistic, and we really hope, we really expect that there could be quite some results in the coming years to green this sector and green it while making it more competitive and more compliant on due diligence aspects. The president, His Excellency President of GHGI, mentioned the challenges, that they are difficult, that there is a sense of urgency. I liked, I was thinking to myself, we see it also as opportunities. So there are challenges, there are difficulties, but there are opportunities also to go green. And Ms. McLeod, you did allude to the solutions, that there are solutions, and I think this is really important to keep in mind. I wanted to mention also, as I alluded to in the beginning, we want to continue working in the garment sector in Cambodia as the EU. One of our priority sectors in our strategy for Cambodia until 2027 continues to be supporting the industrialization, the greening of the industry in Cambodia. And there we want to give priority, first of all, to the garment sector, given that it is for the moment the biggest exporting industry, and to kind of see how we can build a model that potentially also can be exported or can be kind of scaled up or used in other upcoming exporting industries of Cambodia. We will work very closely with our member states on the Team Europe initiative. I don't know how many of you have heard of Team Europe initiatives. If you work with the EU, you will have heard of it, I'm sure. These are initiatives whereby we work very closely with our member states, the EU together with all member states in the country, for kind of enhanced impact, for bigger results, so that we kind of put joint financing for an agreed objective. And in Cambodia, one of those Team Europe initiatives is exactly to green and make more competitive the garment sector, and to enhance its compliance, its social compliance, meaning working conditions, meaning in general the whole due diligence kind of concept. We will work on 4 pillars for the garment sector, as we believe that in order to have an impact, we have to address, together with Cambodia, in partnership with the government, with all stakeholders, all the various aspects that kind of relate to those challenges. So we have identified skills, for instance. We have identified, as I mentioned, due diligence. We have identified trade, logistics, and we have identified green technologies such as the green energy renewable, and energy efficiency. Also, maybe to make a reference to the previous speaker, His Excellency of the Royal Government of Cambodia, we also want to attract further investments in Cambodia for energy, for renewables, including for rooftop solars, working with our European investment banks to be able to attract more financing, and to work in partnership with Cambodia in this area. Let me now zoom out a bit, as I usually is a word I use often, so that to speak more about our regulations and kind of initiatives that are taken in the EU. for the moment, or have been taken various proposals for new legislation in the EU to enhance kind of the greening of the industry, to enhance that markets that end up on our products are sustainable and have respected kind of due diligence principles. I want to say that these proposals that have been tabled by the EU Commission, they are very important for Cambodia. I would say they're important for many countries in the world, but for Cambodia as well, considering that the EU market remains very important for Cambodian exports. And I think that these proposals for new legislation to green, especially the textile sector, is really a good opportunity, creates a momentum to go ahead and really take action that could have a transformative impact for the industry and for the sector here. So I would start maybe at the biggest, the kind of the framework, which is the EU strategy for sustainable and circular textiles. This was adopted earlier this year. Of course, you may all have heard of, I hope, the EU Green Deal, and this strategy is part of the EU Green Deal. And this Green Deal, as a reminder, is the EU strategy for growth, which combines kind of continued economic development with climate neutrality by 2050. So in a nutshell, basically all EU actions and policies will have to contribute to European Green Deal objectives. So this strategy is, the main objective is to shift, so I want to see, is to shift to a climate neutral, circular economy where textile products are designed to be more durable, to be more reusable, and to be more energy efficient with full respect of social rights. And as we will not do this only on our internal market, but this also means that we will promote, as I mentioned, sustainable textiles value chains globally. And this is, of course, one of the reasons why we want to continue, as I mentioned, supporting this sector in Cambodia in the future. So I'm looking where I am. And as I mentioned, there are a number of proposals that are kind of building on this textile strategy, and a number of proposals for legislation which build on this our Green Deal, the EU Green Deal. And obviously we do this because the EU needs to and has to and wants to honor its commitments for climate neutrality. Basically, as we say, it's to walk the talk now. It's really time for more concrete action. I would start to mention the proposal that the European Commission tabled on the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive. Many of you will have heard about such initiatives already. They already exist in some of our member states, for instance, in Germany. And there are already many companies that kind of do abide by due diligence processes to stay competitive and to be able to basically put kind of the greening label on their brand, if you want. But now we want to make those requirements mandatory if those products are to end up on the EU market. So it is about, in a nutshell, it is to comply with human rights principles and environmental standards, to mitigate impacts on the rights included in international human rights agreements, and also to honor environmental due diligence to contribute to limiting the global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius in line with the Paris Agreement. Both large and medium-sized companies are concerned, and it is the textile sector which is kind of targeted by this proposal in the first step, together with the agri-food and extraction businesses. And this, of course, due to the high impact of these sectors. SMEs are not concerned per se, or are not addressed, are not kind of targeted per se, but they will be included as they are part of the value chain of the bigger companies very often. And the bigger companies need to respect this throughout the value chains, the due diligence. The proposal was adopted in February 22, and it has, and as I said, this is still a proposal. This is now being discussed by the legislators in the EU, so the Council and the Parliament, to have hopefully an agreement by the end of next year. And then there will be another 2 years of transposition in the EU member states before this enters into force. So there is still time, but this is coming. I would mention, but I will just mention very briefly, the proposal for regulation on the deforestation-free agriculture. Basically, it is an import to the EU of agriculture products will have to show that they have not contributed to deforestation. I'm mentioning this because the proposal includes a few value chains that might, I don't know, but I guess could impact, well, the textile sector certainly kind of globally, and potentially in the future also in Cambodia already, such as leather and rubber. Again, this is a proposal. This is still being discussed by the legislators in the EU to determine which are the value chains that will be included in this first phase of this regulation. Let me jump to the proposal of a regulation on eco-design for sustainable products. And this basically introduces a mandatory eco-design requirement to make clothes more resistant, to make them basically last longer. And the motto is that sustainable products should be the norm and not the exception. So let's keep that in mind. The basic idea is that products concerned shall only, again, be placed on the EU market if they comply with the set requirements. Now, requirements will differ depending on the sector. And these requirements, once this regulation has entered into force, again, this is still a proposal, once this has entered into force, there will be, the Commission will work out the requirements for the specific sectors, right? So for the textile sectors, there will be a set of requirements that will have to be complied with for the product to end up on the EU market. The main aspects that will be looked at are the durability, the circularity, the use of resources, waste and pollution, which is linked also to the microplastics, and the carbon footprint more generally. And this regulation is expected to be adopted by mid-2023. And as I said, that's the point where work will start on by the European Commission to set the specific requirements. I would finally also mention one more proposal, which is extremely recent. It was adopted by the Commission in September this year on forced labor, which includes child labor. This is relevant for the business and human rights agenda, and it is relevant also for the textile sector worldwide, maybe less so in Cambodia, but worldwide. This is an issue of concern for the EU, and therefore this proposal was adopted very recently. Again, to not have products on the EU market which have been produced with forced labor. And it is also kind of reciprocal. If you want, EU cannot export, can obviously not use forced labor or child labor, and can certainly not export anything that is at risk of such or have been identified as such. This also will be negotiated now with the legislators, and by end of next year, we hope to have finalized the negotiations and have the final regulation in place. Again, I would like to say that all these regulations, and kind of highlight again, I repeated, these proposals for legislative initiatives have been taken because we want to honor our commitment for carbon neutrality by 2050, honor all the commitments that we have included in our EU Green Deal. And we want to work with our partner countries to, continue informing about those requirements directly with the private sector, of course, in dialogue with the government, with various stakeholders, so that there is an understanding of this and how, these requirements can be met, and how maybe we start to work on this immediately. And this is exactly what we do in our joint project that we finance, and GHGi is implementing with the great support of the Ministry of Environment. So there is a sense of urgency, but not due to the regulations in the EU. But I would say that that urgency is, again, as His Excellency Ban Ki-moon mentioned, there is an urgency to act on the climate, on climate change, and take global action. I will stop here, but maybe just one word on Cambodia that I really wanted to mention, which is very important, especially for the textile industry, is Cambodia's endeavor and very good endeavor to graduate from the LDC status by hopefully 2030, and congratulations to this. It's of course extremely positive. This will mean that Cambodia would have to apply to continue having access to unilateral trade preferences to the EU market. The Cambodia would have to apply for the GSP Plus, not to go directly to the GSP, which is less favorable. To apply to GSP Plus, and this is the reason why I'm saying it, it will in any case require that Cambodia complies with human rights conventions, ILO conventions, kind of to ratify and comply with those. So it is kind of linked and goes kind of, it's the same trend of greening and of social due diligence of our economies. So I thank you very much. I hope I wasn't too long. Thank you again for this invitation, and I look forward to continue a fruitful debate. And also let me thank GHGi for really good work on our project, and also thank His Excellency the Ministry of Environment, and also Misty, I don't know if they are present, for their great collaboration to work on these issues and to make this project in particular a success. Thank you.
I think people can hear me now. Thanks so much, Camilla, for this educational ride through all the directives that are coming up. Hopefully it will support our work here. So now we'll dive into the project results, where we're going now. I will do this presentation. So let's go there. I will start it now. So yeah, we are zooming in on the project EU switch project towards energy efficiency and renewable energy in the garment industry. We're working together with GRS and GMEC, are very important for the implementation. And thanks again also for the EU for the support. Basically, we have 4 different components, regulatory components, where we actually work on the Green Model Factory program, which is an engagement program for factories to really show how green they are. And we have one example a bit later. And we also like to include with the regulation monitoring and verification scheme. Probably a little bit later this year or beginning next year, we will let you know more about this. And then the third component is the factory assessment and training, where we will be focusing on today. And then the last part is the financing, where we're also looking into how we can provide financing to the sector to implement these regulations. But today we'll specifically look into the number 3, where we actually did audits. So it was already mentioned, we completed 50 energy audits. It was actually a lot of work. The team interviewed more than 100 potential factories, but only 50 wanted actually to sign up for a free audit. They needed to do quite a bit of work, and we finally got all of them ready. 26 reports are ready, and we have presented so far 23 reports. And we hope that all the reports will be here by the end of November, and that we can present all of the last ones, hopefully by the end of this year or beginning next year. We also like to work on brand engagement. It's a little separate, but also very happy that I think Anastasia will be here. Capacity building, we did a webinar on the HIC. HIC is an index that factories need. It goes a bit further than energy efficiency and renewable energy, also on waste and chemicals, which is also interesting that we're working some cooperation with GIZ to also extend maybe the Green Metal Factory program towards those areas. We also working on a diploma course. We actually find in the factories that there are no really managers that know about energy efficiency and renewable energy. You see, and that's a huge difference from maybe 10 years ago, that there are many factories that have CSR officers, which is also much more easier to talk to because they often speak English. 10 years ago, it was almost impossible. They all spoke Chinese. I mean, you would need to read Chinese, but yeah, their main focus is still on generating money. And then together with GRS is working on also technical briefs, which will also come out maybe 4 by the end of this year and 4 more later next year. Then I just want to zoom into a typical energy audit. So you see below here some of the reports of the different different companies that we presented them to. Also one picture to a factory that we presented the audits to quite recently. And above, it gives like a rough idea about what the energy consumption of a typical factory is. And what is quite interesting is if you look at the firewood, that actually the cost that they spend per year on firewood is not so high. I mean, it's still about 50,000, but CO2 emissions are very high. And if you look at the electricity, the cost is very high, about 150,000, 57,000, but the emissions are a bit lower. So this kind of shows also if you want to focus on reducing your CO2 emissions, it can be quite easily done on looking in, especially in the wood. But the interest of the factories we find is not so much because the wood actually is very cheap. So this is the general factory, and then we go a bit more. This is a list of all the recommendations. I don't want to go too long of them. I think you will be able to, to also look into this later. But what you find is that, for instance, they can have some very low cost investments where they can save quite a bit of energy just by, for instance, changing the voltage, making sure that their capacitor bank is working well. Then there, in almost all the factories, we find a huge inefficient air compressor system with way too high settings at the compressor because their line is only going one way. So they're actually the way to change that can be very easily just to make sure that it's a circular system, that there are some valves in there, because now they're using too high pressure, and then the little hoses that they use are not made for this pressure. So during the audit, we also asked them to keep the compressor on, so we can actually listen to where all the leakages, and it's really incredible how much money you hear every year flowing out, sometimes up to 20%. So there they can actually do, with a little bit of costs, quite a bit of savings. So in the last column, you also can see the CO2 savings. And then there are a little bit more complex things on the boiler. Sometimes, quite often you see now that they use some forest wood and some cashew wood. Cashew wood is, of course, recycled wood, or they're changing the plantations, but they're using it totally wet. And just by drying it, they can save a huge amount of CO2. However, their interest is not that high because they maybe spend only about $100 per day on wood, which is on the total not so much. Then installation of economizer, looking into what is the feed-in temperature. Some have a return system, but then you see that the tank on the top is 80 degrees, but the water that actually goes back into the boiler is only 30 degrees. And if they just optimize that system, the water that goes back into the boiler can be at least 50 or 80 degrees, which means you only need to heat it up 20 degrees to reach 100 for the boiling. So there are some easy things to do, but the interest is not that high, but the CO2 savings quite substantial. And then there's a huge area with the, actually the environment, the working temperature in the factories. They've installed incredibly inefficient systems that need to work on a vacuum system with cooling pads on one side and fans on the other side, but then they just keep the door open. And maybe interestingly, I asked them, the people, do you want to be more cold? And then I close the door for a while, and then later they come back, they open the door again, and then the air is just circulating. But apparently Cambodians really would like to feel the air, like when they're born, they're basically born on with the fan, so they need to feel a draft. It doesn't matter if it's hot or cold. So now we're actually looking at some optimized system, maybe with fabric air ducting, connecting directly to optimize the system. And then of course also solar off-grid and some on-grid is a huge potential for this. Here I made a table with the different technologies. You actually see that the technologies on itself, like the fans in the first column, you can see that they can save up to 50% compared to the other fans. But overall, over the whole savings of the factory, it's not that much. It's only maybe about 4%. LED lighting on itself, it's quite a lot of saving, but if you see overall, it's not that high. Transformers, harmonics, there are just not that many companies. So the companies that have this recommendation can save quite a bit, but overall the audits, it's not a huge amount. A boiler, those who have boilers with quite simple things, making a good return system, you can see that they can save 50%. Overall, it can be about 22%. Air compressors, it's a bit, on itself is quite a bit, but overall not that much. And with grid connected solar, you can actually save quite a bit on the total, and then also on the overall, but the investment, of course, is very high. So when we also look into the recommendations, I think we need to split a bit the differences between the energy efficiency and the solar. Here in this slide, I just kind of made an overview what would be the total potential investment if, say, all the 50 factories, that is the top part, would go for it. So if all factories would go for it, for all the implementations, there would be about 17 million requirements with 2 million for energy efficiency and about 15 million for the solar. GMEC at this time has around 650 companies. These initial estimates are based on the 56 or 26 audits, but soon we can specify it based on the 50 audits. But yeah, there's quite a large potential, especially for solar, with around 200 million. If all factories would go for it, for solar, meaning that there could be maybe around 300 megawatts of solar potential. And what was interesting that we recently also spoke with the Ministry of Energy, And they seem to be a little bit more interested in working on a solar rooftop policy, where they something mentioned that of the 2,000 megawatts, maybe 15 to 20% could be solar. So that would be around, yeah, maybe something around 400 megawatts. So the factories would have this. So this looks quite interesting to see if we can work together to also follow the regulations, because yeah, the government is not happy if factories don't follow the regulations. Yeah, just quickly go a bit through the key learnings. So the saving potential that we find on energy efficiency is similar. At least they can reach what is formulated in the National Energy Efficiency Policy that is going to be approved very soon. There are many low-hanging fruits. We just need to motivate these factories to go for it and do it. And then a large potential for solar rooftops. Yeah, so next challenge is how we sign up for this. We're also working on the energy service companies provision with Eurojam, and also UNDP is working on some of this. We are quite extended our partnerships there. And then we're also working on the finance. So I think that was it for me right now. So thanks very much for this. We have later a session, hopefully not that we can have some questions. And then I will give it over to Martin van der Land from SEC, who is actually a factory that has installed some of the measures based on our recommendations. They were one of the first companies that received our recommendations. So yeah, we like to hear from Martin what they have done so far. So I will remove and have Martin sit here because he is with us here at the Institute of Technology in Cambodia. So Martin van der Land, welcome. And please, yeah, you can take over this.
Good morning, everyone. Just want to thank GHGI and the EU for this event, and thank you for inviting us. Okay. I'll be talking about PPSEC Company Limited. We were granted under this GHGI program an energy audit, and so far, what was the effect in our company? PPSEC company is located in at the economic zone here in Phnom Penh. It's been operating for 3 years now. Just a brief introduction about the company. So PPSEC is a business unit of SEC Group. It's a Hong Kong registered company founded in 2007. It's a member of the GMAC also here in Cambodia. So globally, the company has factories in China, Spain, Cambodia, Turkey, and some offices around the worldwide. So basically, the group is a manufacturer of heat transfer products for garments and footwear industries. And we have one of their partners, top brands like Nike, Adidas, and Puma. So this is just an overview where the company has business worldwide. So in connection to the climate change, 2020, the group has made a commitment to have their environmental responsibility to reduce CO2 30% by 2030. So this is baseline 2020. Okay. As Mr. Roger said that we were the first to be granted, I believe, an energy audit under this program, GHGI. So November 2nd of 2021, we received the audit, the report. I think this was the first. But prior to receiving this report, the company have already through the recommendations during the energy audit, implemented already many of the recommendations inside this audit. So like changing LED bulbs, LED light, like the fixing the compressor lines, no, to instead of I believe that before what was plastic and now it becomes steel, and insulating some of our heating parts because we use a lot of heating for this kind of production. And one of the recommendation under this audit was to use the use of solar power in the factory, because we believe that using solar energy or renewable energy is really the only way to really offset a lot of volume size CO2. So in June of 2022, it was completed. It's a 770 kilowatt system. So just to show proof that the system really works by using solar energy, you can really save from getting energy from the grid. As you can see, pre-solar months, and the post-solar months, it's almost 50% savings. So on average, these are the energy used by the factory and the annual energy production of the system. So if everything remains the same, based on SEC target, so the projected CO2 avoided is around 43%. So far, we are meeting it, but the company are still growing and more equipment are being added for the production. Because we have already a second factory at PPS-ESET, and for sure, we will overgrow already the size of the system that we have right now. And in the second factory, since we have some challenges on the roof, we have not implemented any rooftop yet, similar to the factory one. But what the company is doing is trying everything to use renewable solutions so that minimize the grid usage of energy. So in this, you can see we are trying or testing a solar hybrid aircon, so which we have here in Factory 2. So far, it's working well. Most of the time, we are not using AC for this one. We just use AC if really the sun energy is really low, and to have cooling, so we have to switch to AC to help on the cooling. And we have also planned to put some solar carport in this factory, just to have more help on the CO2 savings. Because right now we are still looking for some solution to use in our roof structure. So once we have that, we are trying to look for lightweight panels, something like that, to be implemented on the roof. So far, thank you very much.
Thanks, Martin, for your great presentation, and to see one of the factories really implementing some of the measures. And then I believe that Anastasia from H&M is also with us. I believe, she has also managed to be online, so great to see you. And we'd really like to hear some of your perspectives from the brands. some of the brands or some of the factories that we visited also or audited also produce for H&M. I think some of them already shared the reports with you, so we like to hear a bit what you're doing in general, but then also maybe specifically maybe related to the project. But we also very interesting, maybe also what H&M is doing in general related to environment and their producers here.
Perfect. Thank you so much for the introduction. I just wanted to check that you can see my screen.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you so much, everyone, and great insights shared earlier. As Rajia mentioned, what I'm going to do today is to share a little bit more about environmental management at H&M, and in particular, what are some of the key tools and programs we're currently focusing on to help green our supply chain in Cambodia, but also across our other markets. So for those that don't know me, I'm the Environmental Program Manager at H&M. I cover China, Vietnam, Myanmar, and Cambodia. So I get to have a comparison between the different countries, including the differences and progress as a market. So what I wanted to start off with is an overview of our targets and our commitments. They're very ambitious. And to start off with, what we're trying to achieve is to reduce our carbon emissions by 56% by 2030. And at the same time, we want to try and have 100% renewable electricity in our own operations and our supply chain, and then achieve net zero by 2040. So with this bigger picture in mind, we've come up with a particular program that we call the Green Fashion Initiative. And it's really a tool to help our suppliers accelerate their decisions and transition with us in order for them to meet our expectations. How the program works, or how the tool works, is that it accelerates the decision making, and then it looks at gravitation. So trying to become the industry's leader, where garment suppliers and tech suppliers come to us for support, supplying strong business cases in return for new technology. And then we also look at innovation. So we're always actively looking for investment opportunities where we can buy minority or majority share of companies with solutions that we rely on within our industry. So with this in mind, we actually launched this tool earlier this year across our production markets, including Cambodia, with expectations. So in order to sort of leverage GFI, we expect our suppliers to have established a 2030 energy roadmap. So what this is really an overview of actions that our suppliers will take up to 2030 in order for us to have an idea of, are they on track to reduce their carbon emissions by 56%, or at least close to? Or, are we looking more at, are they not prioritizing some of the actions that we need them to take? And once our suppliers put together their energy roadmaps, in hindsight, this should really include all their energy efficiency recommendations that they would have received from third parties. It could be installing rooftop solar, changing their boilers, changing their fuel source, etc. It's anything that can demonstrate that reduction. If and where they need financial assistance, then they can apply for GFI, where we will provide them a low interest loan, and in some cases, direct cash grant. Our intention is to not make any money, so it's not a for-profit program or tool, but rather it's really looking at accelerating that transition as much as possible. So the main KPI for GFI through our loans is really decarbonization as decarbonization impact. So in addition to the roadmaps, we also expect our suppliers to join energy efficiency and water efficiency programs. And of course, we want them to support renewable electricity and renewable fuel as much as possible. Because we do realize that in order to reach our targets at the end of the day, we need to categorize or prioritize our suppliers based on their capacity and capability, but we also recognize the need for our suppliers that need a little bit more assistance from us over the transition period. So other efforts we have at H&M that contribute to some of our commitments and targets include identifying carbon intensity rating and an internal carbon pricing. So where orders are placed is quite important for us. We're trying to create that green factory or that perfect green factory, in other words, within our supply chain. We're also looking at specific lower carbon materials or recycled materials. And we're trying to come up with strategies around no flying of orders and biodiesel for shipping. So this is where we're looking at the service providers that we're partnering up with and what they can offer in terms of lower carbon emissions strategy, etc. So in terms of supplier challenges and opportunities, and Rajia has already touched upon some of these points, but despite having, our commitments and targets, and despite providing support to our factories, whether that's in Cambodia or other markets, we still see a lack of environmental capability and capacity at the factory level. We don't own our factories, just to make that clear. We share our factories with other brands, and other brands have different commitments and different targets. They might have a similar program, but there is still different program expectations. And this can sometimes overwhelm the factory in terms of how do they prioritize the programs, but also if they don't have the capacity to meet the expectation, then that the workload is quite large for them. Many of the factories we've seen also don't have environmental budgets, so it's quite difficult for them to address some of the changes that we require, despite having very earlier on conversations and the need to transition and the need to transform. We've also seen a lack of confidence to make key decisions regarding environmental progress. Some of our factories, we have factories where we can delegate, and then there's factories that we need to coach or direct a little bit more. And it's the factories that require coaching and directing that need extra resources, extra time, extra support for them to build their confidence to make decisions. And interestingly enough, when we speak to some of our factories, we have other programs around chemical, around water, as well as energy. And energy seems to be the hardest program for them. And the feedback we've received is because they feel that making energy changes is not as tangible as, say, making a change to a chemical process or a system, or making a change to their ETPs and improving their water recycling rate, or building a rainwater harvesting tank. So one is more immediate than the other, or at least tangible and untangible for our factories. But I think that again goes back to capability and capacity. But what we see at H&M as opportunities include aligning with other brands. I think it's quite important that we come together and have a collective action on energy in particular, and that we try and support long-term capacity building programs. Everyone's got training programs. We even have our own training programs. But what we feel is really needed are these long-term 6 months or even a year's training program where there is that practical element, where there is that, having a deep understanding of how to actually do something. And that training is extended to beyond the sustainability person. Quite often in our factories, one person is responsible to manage both environment and social. And that's already quite a lot of work on its own. Most importantly, I think, is promoting peer-to-peer learning, something our factories have consistently asked us about. Energy efficiency or energy as a whole is understanding what's being done in other markets, or hearing from another factory how they've managed to overcome a challenge, how they have, what has been their experience with rooftop solar and engaging with a service provider. what has been their experience with energy efficiency and how do they come to make some of those decisions. And last but not least, something for us to consider is prioritizing key programs for our factories and taking a step-by-step approach to really ensure that we get that impact and that value for us as well as for the factories themselves. That's about it. Thank you very much. Sorry, Rajay, you're on mute.
Yeah, yes. Thanks very much for your presentation. Great insight. And to hear also, I'm still on mute.
No, you're not. We can hear you.
Okay, yeah. So thanks very much. Also interesting to hear about your green initiative and potential to link up with finance. I think, yeah, we also can focus a bit more on the factories where we're working on together to see if we can help them more on the ground as well. That's also in the plan for, yeah, if we are kind of completed all our audits, we're looking into that as well. So this is actually now a time for some discussions and questions. There is a chat, so if you would be able to put the questions in the chat box, then we can answer or ask those questions to the person. So please mention maybe to whom you would like to ask your question and then what question there is. But initially, there's a request from Camila. Maybe Camila, the organizers can unmute her, and then we can see if Camila still can come with her question. Yeah,
yes,
Camila.
thank you. You hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry, I didn't want to take the floor immediately, being the first one. I was just, I put up my hand kind of as a reflex. But indeed to HM, it is a follow-up question directly to this presentation. Sorry, do you hear me? Now I see that
yes.
My computer is blocked. Yeah. So my question was because I got curious when you said, Anastasia, you said that you cover many countries and that you get to see and that you can therefore compare and you can see differences between countries. But you didn't really speak about this. I was wondering if you have any interesting observations in that sense. And there I would like also to link it to this interesting point that you made on peer-to-peer, that this is something that factories are asking for. I think in general, when we have heard this is something I think also the government often ask for, other stakeholders often ask for. I think it's a very good way of working. And therefore I wanted to ask if you have such kind of initiatives, what kind of recommendations you would have in such an area, if, you know, for anybody who'd like to organize this, including for the
Sure.
EU potentially in future programs. Yeah, around these areas I wanted to know more.
Thank you so much. Not at all. Thank you so much for your questions. I'll answer your first one first. Insights from different markets and what have I seen? So Vietnam's quite an important market for us. We have slightly more suppliers in Vietnam than we do in Cambodia. And that's primarily, if I'm speaking from a sustainability perspective, you know, the market's more mature in a sense of sustainability performance. There's a regulatory framework in place that incentivizes GHG reduction, renewable energy. They're working on their DPPAs, and many of the factories have IREX. So from that standpoint, we spend less time convincing and building capacity and more time looking at technologies and improvements where we can. Whereas in Cambodian market, a lot of the time we are spending building capacity, building capability, trying to convince why, you know, all of a sudden there needs to be this strong change and emphasis on improving sustainability. The other key difference, I think, in Vietnam in particular is you have a lot of brands present in Vietnam, and a lot of them, such as Puma, Nike, and Adidas, they have very strong targets and commitments similar to us. And we share some of our factories with them. Whereas in Cambodia, some of our brand partners, they're still prioritizing social performance over environment. So we're sort of, I think, slightly ahead when it comes to environmental performance and requirements. So we're still, again, spending time building that ecosystem and trying to get that buy-in in Cambodia. In terms of peer-to-peer learning, so this is something that we started this year. We've started to initiate twice a year reflection workshops with our suppliers. And part of this is for us to sense check how are we performing, but also what do the suppliers think in terms of their environmental performance? What has been challenging? What kind of support do they need? And you know, part of that involves a survey that we do with our units, where we ask them to rank types of support, and peer-to-peer as well as technology information always happens to be the top two. And so in these workshops, we try and invite our suppliers to share best practice. And part of our job is to try and find, you know, what exactly do we want to recognize performance on for each of these factories, and then guide them into making a case study, basically. But this is something that we found beneficial for our own team information as well. In addition to the suppliers, that we've now extended this to trying to other countries. So not just limiting peer-to-peer within each country we're in, but inviting suppliers from Vietnam to share with Cambodia, or from Bangladesh to share with Cambodia, etc., which is something that we want to do more of next year. We have a partnership with WWF, and with WWF, you know, they're working with us on renewable energy, and part of our partnership looks at finding more case studies across all our production markets and trying to put them in such a way that it is a useful tool for our suppliers, depending on where they're operating, etc.
Thanks so much, Anastasia. I just want to make a quick remark. Officially, the program is over right now. However, the organizers have said that we still have another 15 minutes to maybe look through some more of the comments and the questions. So if there anybody really need to leave right now, thanks so much for your participation. And then we can just continue a few more questions, if that is also okay for the speakers so far. So maybe Anastasia, there was one more question actually from Zanida Fadiva, who is also from the SCP facility that managed the EU Switch projects. How much money is available, how to get it, and all of those details. So maybe you could say something how you could get some more information for that if they are, I guess they need to probably be a H&M supplier.
Sure.
But
yes.
Other than that, you can where people could get that. Or
sure, thank you. Thank you so much for the questions, Zenaida. To give you a little bit more detail, so there's no loan limit. Our factories come to us with anything from $500,000 to $4 million. As long as they can demonstrate that decarbonization impact, that's the most important factor for us. We obviously prioritize this to all our suppliers within our supply chain. There is a difference between a direct investment and a loan, and a loan is easier to provide. And with a direct investment, there is a different process, and they do need to provide more detail as to why they would require a direct investment. One of the criteria we do look at is types of technology that the supplier wants to apply. So anything that's new and interesting it has been demonstrated somewhere and the factory believes that it can improve their operations, and this is something we would consider. To date, we have received proposals, or we have provided loans for rooftop solar for replacing boilers. So replacing a coal boiler to a biomass boiler, or in India, there's been a few loans provided for replacing boilers to solar thermal boilers. So solar thermal boiler is something that we're interested in, and we want to encourage, we want to encourage our suppliers to try and improve as much as possible, and where possible, electrify our supply chain, and then encourage rooftop solar as a long-term solution. So for example, in Cambodia, a lot of our suppliers use biomass at the moment, but given that biomass regulations might change in a few years, and there might be associated emissions, especially if it's not agricultural biomass, then we would want our suppliers to swap their boilers for an electric one, and then hopefully have rooftop solar afterwards.
Great, thanks so much. There was one question from Helena for how much money would be required to green the total sector. So for the 650 companies, we estimated for energy efficiency around 27 million. So maybe that is, yeah, and we are working on the details further. Then, but that would be if all factories would implement those measures. And another 200 million for solar, but there you actually see that there are quite a lot of lease companies like Total, CME and Green Yellow that have these monies available for companies that would actually chose for a lease. Then there's also a question.
To add on that,
sorry, show me, it's here with me.
Yeah. So to answer that question, yeah, it's Roger rightly mentioned that we require 230 million US dollar to implement all the measures for 650 factories. And our target is to have up to 20 to 30% of the factory actually implementing this measure. So if we target the entire sector, it will be up to 40 to 60 million US dollar targets that we need to mobilize finance to implement this measure. If we are to implement all this measure in participating factory, 50 factory, the investment required would be around 17 million. So that's the areas that GHG will be working towards to bridge the finance gap so that factory can access finance to implement the energy efficiency and solar measures that we are recommending from our energy audit.
Thanks very much, Xiaomi. Then Eric Buisman is asking on the solar PV, how could we convince factories to invest in solar, given the long payback time and the fact that they're owning factories and may not in for the long run? So yeah, that are exactly the issues. I could answer something, but maybe is there somebody else that would like to answer? Maybe is there something with His Excellency Sopolet say a few words on this maybe from the government side, or is it too much of a question for you? I believe what we heard from the Ministry of Energy is that they're actually really looking into making a specific solar policy with what I mentioned, 15 to 20%. So that looks really promising. So we have that available at all the roofs. But of course, there are many issues also with the lease of the factories, the short-term contracts with the garment sectors. But His Excellency Sopolet, would you mind to share a few of your thoughts on this?
Thank you very much. You put me right on the spot. Well, the policy is being drafted, and the Ministry of Environment, we support very much the use as much as solar energy as possible. However, there's policy to be decided by the Ministry of Energy, and that I think is coming up. And I think until then, we are waiting for them for finishing up and for the right time to implement it. But again, we support very much. Thank you.
Sorry, thanks very much. I have also Shomi here, who's eager to add some other contributions.
Yeah, so it's a very important question. In terms of installation of solar, we can first introduce the energy saving potential from installing solar. That's like one benefit that the factory can receive. But there is a practical challenge in the case of Cambodia, which is the capacity charge that has been the barrier for factories to install solar. However, based on the recent discussion with the Minister of Energy and Mines, they are preparing to create a platform where the factory can be benefited from discounted rate if they install solar. So there is a favorable policy and schemes that are being prepared by the royal government of Cambodia, which can be also a carrot for factories to install more solar. And the other way that we can support the factory, which is to have work with the brand who is giving order to the factories to provide insurance scheme so that even if they make a long-term contract for solar panel, there will be kind of insurance scheme that can support the factories to make a decision on installing solar. So we are working from various aspects to reduce the barrier for factories to install solar in terms of policy side, as well as like working with the brands to provide the insurance scheme for the factories.
Thanks very much. I see there's still quite a lot of other questions here, but I think we are kind of getting also very hungry here at the Cambodian side. I hope in Korea you already have had your lunches. So unless there is anybody really wanted to raise a last hand and some last question. Yeah, there are quite a lot of more questions, but okay. Maybe the one, here's one from Jeroen. We are a solar company. We speak lots of garment factories in Cambodia, but have a hard time finding the right person to talk to. Can GHGI or the brands help us to connect the right people, the factories, so to be more efficient? Is anybody, show me you again, or shall we ask Anastasia or what?
I can.
GHGI, okay, yeah. So show me, can I give the word again to you?
Yeah, so absolutely yes. This is what we do as part of EU Switch projects. We have the list of 50 participating factories, and we have all the energy audit recommendations. And so far, we have already received a strong demand and questionnaires from these 50 factories. So what we plan to do is we will be doing more active matchmaking between clean energy suppliers and also our participating factory. And as part of our midterm event, we will be doing the matchmaking event with the list of the clean energy service company and with the factories who are really willing to implement the recommendations and solar measure as well. So there'll be more events and also a platform where the clean energy supplier and then participating factories can meet up. So to answer your question, absolutely yes. And then there will be more events and occasions where you can showcase your products to the factories.
When can we start? When can we start? Ask Jeroen. Jeroen is actually also here with us from ChemWorks.
So the initiative has been already starting. So we will be doing more one-on-one matchmaking first based on the audit report recommendations. And so we will be reaching out to the potential suppliers with the identified factories who are willing to implement the solar measures.
So there was one more last question. Do you support early stage studies for textile factories that want to reduce their carbon footprints? So definitely, we have done 50 audits, so we don't have any more free audits to give away. However, new factories can definitely also join and get benefits and learn from what we have done. And also, if they really are leading change agents, join the Green Model Factory program. We also have this training program starting for their staff also. We especially support also female participants to join. So that will start in February with a 10-month course. So also what Anastasia mentioned, we really want to get these people up to a high level that they really know how to implement and that they don't need to ask the questions to other persons. So there's definitely opportunity for that. And we also like to further work on that. So with that mentioned, I want to thank everybody very much for their great contributions. And I would like to give the final remarks to Shomi to end this seminar.
Thank you so much, Roger. Yeah, I am very much moved by what we have shared today at the sessions, and also by the fact that we brought the various actors and partners in the same room to share what we have achieved together and what more to come. First of all, I would like to thank His Excellency Eng Som-Palet and Camilla from EU delegations and Helena for joining this session until the very end and also providing your insights and inputs. And also thanks to all the presenters and the audience who share their thoughts and questions. And we have seen the huge potential in improving energy efficiency in Cambodia, both in terms of energy saving and as well as investment mobilization potentials. Let me remind you of the fact that based on our energy audit result, we have identified that there is more than $200 million investment requirement to implement energy efficiency and solar recommendation in the garment sector in Cambodia.
Maybe just the camera is here in case you like to look at the people. Okay. It's a bit difficult to say.
Okay.
Sorry.
And the journey has not been easy because we started with very small. There was a lack of awareness from the factories, and we had limited experts on the ground. But I want to give great congratulations to our implementing agencies, including GHGI, JERES, and GMAC for conducting 50 energy audits. This is a remarkable. Many development partners have tried, but this large number of factories on board for energy audit has been the biggest achievement that we have made. And I would like to thank PPSEC, who has been leading the best practice in Cambodia. And I had a great conversation with the managing director of PPSEC, and he stressed the fact that EU Switch project implemented by GHGI has opened up his eyes to the solar business potential in Cambodia. So now they have expanded their business area to include installation of solar panel to the factory, which has been another great achievement that we have made throughout these projects. And I would like to also stress the fact that we are working with the international brand like H&M. So it's really great to see their roadmap on improving energy efficiency in the garment sector. Last but not the least, I would like to thank Camilla from EU for their generous financial support. And they have been really providing the thought leadership in this area of improving energy efficiency, as well as sustainable raw material in the garment sector. So with this, I want to conclude my remarks by saying that we ensure you of GHGI continued commitment and efforts for improving energy efficiency in the garment sector. And we would like to thank everyone, including the government, donor, development partners, and factories, and also clean energy suppliers who joined together to